Hey guys, grow the farm up. We're out planting today. What that is that's probably a 15-year-old John Deere 12-row planter with all the modern upgrades on it. You know, if I went to sell it today, it'd be worth $15,000. And this tractor here is like a 2004. Probably buy one on Big Iron for $25,000-$30,000. It's got about 8,000 hours on it. I've owned it since about 2,000 hours on it. And tracks. Why tracks instead of tires? Some of you out there might be asking, why do some farmers drive tracks and why do some farmers drive tires? Well, this is one of those old tractors that gave tracks a bad name, and it gives it's bolted solid. There's no suspension, so you feel every single bump in the road. They're really hard on equipment and when you transport, and they had no give in them whatsoever. Okay, now the newer generation of tracks are much, much better, and they give a lot more. In fact, I used to own Caterpillars, and I'll explain why I like tracks over tires in a moment, but I used to like Caterpillar. Caterpillar had better tracks, but the John Deere had the better tractor. You know, I always had trouble with my Caterpillar tractors, always, but the hydraulics and the tracks were just 10 years ahead of John Deere's rudimentary system. Now, John Deere has got a pretty good track system on today now, but you know, who has money for the brand new ones? There's some, I think in 2018 or 2019, they switched to air ride with everything, but this is no air ride, so you feel every bump. You can only go about 10 miles an hour down the road when you're moving because you just hit washboards, and I mean, just wants to rattle the cab to pieces. Now, why tracks over tires when I just told you all of the downside of having these tracks? Well, a couple of things, but you know, your alternative is tires. And almost every tractor that does serious farm work, you see it have duals on there. And that's, you know, an upside and a downside to tires and tracks. The reason they put duals on there is because when a tractor is pulling, I mean, when it's really lugging and pulling, most of the weight of the tractor tips back onto its rear, and it kind of pushes down into, take a look at the monitor there, but kind of pushes the rear down into the soil. And so that's the thing with tracks too. When you only got 18-inch wide tracks on either side and you start pulling, you know, you've only got 18 inches wide, and it will create a zone of compaction. So that's your trade-off. The reason I like tracks, two reasons. One is that they match up with all my seed corn equipment. You can go wide track and go 120 inches wide, and so you never drive over the inside row. I'm a big believer in that pinch row theory, and using duals that way, especially the way that the CCS planters and all this 24-row equipment is set up to also compact you a lot of times with duals over 2 or 3 rows, the same rows you drove over. And it's like guys are trying to get 90-foot wide planters, so they have less of those 4-row strips that don't even come up from the compaction. Well, you know, that's that pinch row theory is real, and so tracks just over, even if they're not quite as good, boom, that right there makes them win. But second of all, I've owned this tractor for pretty near going on 2 decades now. You don't need fancy new equipment to make yields and grow, okay, and grow good high quality stuff. It's in your brain. But you know what, guys? See what you don't see up there is a front end, and you guys run an MFWD and front wheel assist like all modern tractors are. If you're going to run that tractor for near 2 decades and 6,000 hours, you're going to put about 10, 20 grand in that front end. That entire apparatus, powertrain, whole thing, and the way that it works. Never had to redo a front end on, I own a number of these tractors. Now, you do occasionally have to put new bushings in. You know, there's little little idlers up front that the bushings come out. I've gotten to the point where we just replace them every few years, and we've gotten pretty good at it. And see, when you're not pulling, doing things like planting, okay, the weight of the tractor is distributed evenly across the front and the back. And look at how smooth the ride is. I mean, it's much bumpier on the road, but compared to a guy planting with tires on this afternoon, I mean, look, nothing's even moving. I mean, just smooth field. I mean, you could literally set a full cup of hot 120 degree steaming coffee on my knee right now and it would not spill. That's how smooth the ride is once you get it to the field. And then they make them better now with air rides and stuff, you know. There we just crossed a little draw, but the weight is distributed evenly enough that the ride is so much smoother, but also that pinch row. And you might ask, why a little 12 row and not a big 24 or 36 row for your operation? Well, we do have a large operation and we have bigger planters, yeah. But we found having multiple different planters, slightly smaller, for one, allow you to put more different crops in at one time. You know, if you got a 48 row planter and one thing's broken on it, all 48 planting rows are shut down. And the other side of it is we grow so much specialty seed and high protein, non-GMO seed, and more nutrient dense, identity preserved seed and feed and food, and have a number of specialty contracts. And so you're planting 30 acres of this variety, 50 acres of that variety, 10 acres of this variety. And we've just found that these single unit boxes are just the way to go. I've tried to do it with CCSs and that sucks. And most everything in my seed shows up to me in single unit bags because that's, as a seed increaser and a seed grower, part of the intricate circle, like it comes out of the lab a handful of kernels, and then they do that one more time in the lab and give you like 30 pounds. And then it's up to guys like me to plant it and turn it into a variety that is eventually going to be planted on millions of acres. That's how new hybrids come to life in the bean business, and it's much the same in the corn business. So, also you can get in and out when it's muddy better with tracks, and you can plant because your planter's much lighter when it's damp outside, and often when you're planting seed corn, you have to plant it multiple different times. You have to plant the female rows at one time, and you have to plant the male rows at another time. And you could plant the male first, some varieties, just depends. And then you'll have to come back and plant the 10 rows of female, subtract the 2 rows of male, it's a 12 row planter. And you have to do that on time, whether conditions are perfect or not. And so these lighter 12 row planters that can be carried on the 3-point on these tracks that get in and out really nicely, especially in moist conditions. So that's your trade-off, and that's your tracks versus tires and what you choose. And guys, these John Deere tractors just run. I used to like Caterpillars. I see a lot of blue tractors on YouTube, which is really cool. I always wanted a Ford. In fact, I test drove one back in 1997. I always thought the cabs to those Caterpillar Challengers and the Ford tractors were far superior to the John Deere cabs until about 5-6 years ago. Now John Deere's a pretty tough cab to beat, even for this old girl. But you don't need brand new steel to be good at what you do, guys. Get the old stuff and fix it up and repair it to new. All right, grow the farm up. My family's here. I'm gonna stop and give a ride.